1,000 years of sacrifice in our veins. And every generation must know its own suffering.
If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself for the podcast?
Sure, my name's Richard. I run Gizeh Records here in Manchester in the UK, and also play in a band called Aidan and Amissa, and do various other artistic, creative endeavours around those two things as well.
So readers of the blog will be familiar with some of the Gizeh Records artists, particularly Glissando and 100 Year Man, who I've written about quite a bit. I've plugged Amissa and the Rustle of the Stars a few times as well. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your musical background. Well, how would you describe the music that you make?
It's a tricky one. Let's see.
Would it be fair to say that you're not confined to a single genre?
Yeah, I think so. That's not really something that's too interesting to me. I guess generally speaking, the music leans in an experimental direction, generally with quite a darker element to it. The music I've done over the years has ranged reasonably widely, but I'm interested in all kinds of different music. So there's no interest to me to just keep making the same records over and over. I guess in some ways, all the music I've made comes under a certain banner to a degree, but I think the scope inside that banner is quite wide. You know, from the stuff I've done with Shield Patterns, which is more of a dark pop kind of element, you know, to some super um, like doomy, weirder stuff as well, and everything in between, I guess.
And would it be fair to say, if we're talking about the banner that your music falls under, a lot of it comes under the category, or people will describe it as atmospheric or experimental?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Yeah, I can live with that.
And so, as a musician, when you play an instrument, what do you usually end up playing?
From a writing point of view, do you mean?
Yeah, or even recording.
Writing and recording, usually beginning with a guitar or sometimes a synth. I generally don't have ideas necessarily sat around in my head, melodies and so on. I give myself time to sit down in front of the computer with a bunch of instruments, mostly guitars, synths, and pedals. Um, Usually have like a Logic session open with the ability to record, and I just sit and play for a while, see if I can, you know, hit on any good ideas. And if I think I'm onto a good idea, I'll hit record that part. And then, you know, if the idea feels strong enough, try and develop from there. Some days I'll just go and record like, you know, 10 different themes, just constantly kind of going at things, and then at the end of the day, like sit back and take a look and see if anything is any good. But yeah, I rarely have melodies sat around in my head and go, oh yeah, I really need to get that down. It's more, I'll give myself afternoons or full days of just sitting in the studio and working on music and see what comes out really. And then over the course of time, you know, you can find themes between certain pieces. You know, something might feel strong enough where you can make an entire track out of one idea. Sometimes it ends up being 20 seconds of a song. You know, it's changes each time. But yeah, there's that's generally the way I approach things. And none of the music I do really has lyrics or anything, so I'm not really sat around working on lyrics. It's more just musical ideas, trying to put down as much as possible and see where the gold lies within all that stuff. And generally speaking, it's good to go away, you know, put a bunch of stuff down, go away for a while, make some coffee, or even, you know, leave it overnight, sleep on it, come back, see if you still feel like it's good, you know, and then work on things from there. Like I'm constantly working on music, so I don't really work on like one album at a time. I'm just kind of working on music, and then, you know, when it comes time to put a new record together, there'll be some material to pull from, and then you find the theme, or you have a theme in mind and you try and put that thing together from the material you've been working on.
Now, you're involved with several different musical projects, including The Rustle of the Stars, Glissando, Shield Patterns, and Son Amissa. How do you divide the music that you write into these different projects? How do you decide what belongs where?
Well, these days it's a little easier because the only real project out of all of those things that's active right now is this and Amissa. Everything else is kind of sleeping for the moment. And over the years, I've generally not crossed over with the different bands too much. There tends to be, like in the early days, the Glissando was the main project, and so all the writing that I was doing was for that. And then over the years, a few of the projects have come up, but most of the time they have like their own space. So we say, oh, okay, we'll work on this, and we'll take a year to work on it and do some touring and so on. And with the S and Mr stuff, I can generally just work on that on its own now. I mean, there's nothing else really going on with the other projects for the moment. So that makes things quite easy because it means I've got a lot of material to work with. I don't really need to think about keeping it for another project or anything like that.
And how much of the music that you write, or I guess record, is improvised, and how much of it is composed beforehand?
None of it's really composed beforehand. Most of the time, it's really just sitting down with a guitar and trying to find something that works and recording it and then build from there. There's no real. I mean, maybe you've got an idea for like an arc of a song and the way you want to present the song and the structure and so on. That tends to happen sometimes. Most of that comes from listening to other music and going, oh, that's cool. That's an interesting way that thing developed, and try and work out like, well, why is it interesting? And okay, maybe we could try that, next time when I'm putting together an album or a song or something. But there's no real composing goes into it beforehand, to be honest.
How did you find your way to this unorthodox style of music? What was your musical background before this?
I got into music quite late. I was probably like 17 or 18 when I really got into music. When I was in high school, and I was kind of into I guess what you call like indie music back then, with little bits of metal like Metallica and things like that around that time. And then I discovered, I guess, what people would now describe as post rock. So it was really when Godspeed were starting out and Mogwai was starting out with their first albums, and discovered those bands, and that just opened up like this new universe of like, this is the music I've been searching for. It was like someone turning on a light, and everything really started to make sense with music. Then it tapped into something emotionally, I guess, that and then it makes you go off and find all the other bands that influence those bands. And this was kind of pre-internet or really early internet, so you were still. And I worked in a record shop, which was really good at that time because you could just order in loads of things, read the notes inside the sleeve, and track down different albums and so on. So that was really the first time where I really started to think about music seriously. And then that sparked the ideas of starting to make some music of my own, which then ran into some ideas of like maybe starting a label, or at least putting a badge on like the early Glissando recordings, and just finding my way. Like early on, started to investigate labels a little bit more, and their back catalogs and how they're run and these kind of things, and everything's just progressed from there. Really, just small steps over the years. This was almost 20 years ago now, so yeah, been doing this a while.
Now, when you say that bands like Godspeed Black Emperor and Mogwai represented something that you were searching for, what is it about that style of music that appealed to you?
It's hard to say, really. I think it's just one of those things that you just know it's right. It presses the right buttons. It triggers the right things. I guess it has to hit on something on an emotional level, and I think all those bands kind of did that, but in an unusual way that I'd never really heard before. Taking those elements of, uh, of classical music and so on, and putting this more of a rock or noise kind of template over them. I just found that really interesting, and that kind of world was so vast for me back then. There's so much new music to discover, and and the likes I'd never heard before. I never really had. I'm the oldest kid in my family, and I never really had anyone from a young age to go like, yeah, listen to this or listen to this. So I was a real latecomer when it came to all that stuff. So it was quite fascinating to discover things at a really rapid rate over a few years and just listen to so much music. And I never had any music training, or I've taught myself everything that I can do. I've taught myself. Doesn't matter what it is. So I guess part of the interest in that kind of music felt like I can make this music. There's no rules, there's just a different way of playing. Nothing felt really traditional, or like you need to be able to play guitar really well. It was like you can play open chords with loads of effects pedals, and all those things started to open some doors and spark some ideas, I guess. And yeah, just took it from there really. And also I think it felt possible, and I'm not sure how much of that is down to the bands or the music or my own attitude, but getting into that kind of music, it felt like this is possible for me to do this. And I think that's quite an important thing.
Now, were you already playing music when you discovered these kind of bands?
I started playing bass a little bit in like a high school kind of band where we were just kind of ripping off like Manic Street Preachers and this kind of thing. But that was it really. I taught myself how to play bass. Didn't play very well, in those days. So yeah, there was an inkling of like, okay, maybe I can do this. But I think in high school it was more to do with like indie band kind of mentality. I had a couple of friends who were into the same music, and we never really took it seriously at all. It was more about the like an attitude thing of like being 18 or 17 or something like that. So there's no real artistic side of it. That all came a little bit later on.
was never in those places, and in the frame became a stranger with an unfamiliar face. Now in night visions I am swimming water still, slowly moving, washing clean, cold reminders of a face I don't recall.
So let's talk about Gizeh Records. When did you form Gizeh?
Well, that will have been in, well, the early days are a little vague because it depends on what you call like a real record label. But initially, in the early 2000s, we started recording some music with Glissando, and we wanted to sort of not even release it, but just make a CD, and play a couple of shows. And so when we made the CD, we were like, oh, we should put like a made up label name on it. So we thought we found this word and we thought it was kind of funny and it was difficult for people to pronounce and so on.
Was there meant to be a pun in the name Gizeh Records? Because it's Gizeh as in the temples, but it also kind of the way British people pronounce geezer, right?
Yeah. No, there's no pun. There's no pun intended. It's to do with the pyramids.
Okay.
But but it is quite funny when you pronounce it to somebody and they think, yeah, exactly what you just said. So it becomes quite difficult. In hindsight, it'd be kind of cool. Maybe if I had to do this again, I would pick a different name. But yeah, it's stuck, and yeah, you can't really change it after a certain point. I still kind of like the idea that people find it difficult to pronounce. It's not so good from a marketing point of view, but who cares? So yeah, we put this pretend label name on this CD, and we played a couple of shows and became friends with a couple of other bands. And this would have been in like 2003, I guess. And so these bands were in a similar position to us, and they also had like music that was just kicking around on tape or mini disc or whatever. And so yeah, we said, well, okay, let's do a couple more CDs, and it went from there really. And the more shows we were playing, which were mostly just local shows at that point, in Leeds. We lived in Leeds, and just met a few more bands and kept going with that. And over the course of time, I started to take it more seriously. Tried to find some distribution, talk to other labels, find out how on earth you do the various elements of running a record label. And I still worked in a record shop at that time. Worked at HMV in Leeds, and so that really allowed me kind of a really nice an ability to find out more about distribution and how all those the sort of ins and outs of the record industry kind of work. And yeah, just over the years, it's progressed year on year. Take it more serious, and it's just grown steadily since then. Really, just you're learning all the time and working out new ways to do things, and addressing the challenges that come from running a small label. The industry's changing all the time. yeah, it's reasonably straightforward from that point of view. And as with anything, the more you do things, the more people you meet, and the more people get to know about what you're doing and send you music. And we started to tour in Europe and meet European bands and make friends with people over there, which then allowed a different angle as well, starting to work with foreign bands and so on, which also was interesting. Yeah, we've continued to do that and keep our heads above water, and we're still here, which is quite nice. A lot of the labels we were friends with and things back then have they don't exist anymore. So yeah, it's quite nice that we can keep going to this point.
So you mentioned some of the challenges in running a label in the current musical climate. I'd like to come back to that in a little bit, but I'm curious where the impulse to start your own label and release your own music came from, because that's a path that a lot of people I know are familiar with, coming from that DIY sort of punk ethic, but it's not a path a lot of people choose. Why did you choose it?
Well, I guess initially the idea with the label was never to. There was never really a big idea like, let's start a record label. Like some people go like, yeah, this is it. We've begun this company, and the way that Gizeh started was really kind of by accident. And so it took a few years of more and more accidents of really not making a big deal out of any of the releases. And over time, we were kind of like, oh, okay, this is kind of interesting. Maybe we could do more. But in terms of releasing my own music, I'm definitely a control freak, and I'm definitely very interested in DIY based ethics and so on. In the early 2000s, I was really into Fugazi and these kind of bands as well. So there was a real sense of, as I said before, like making things possible. Like you can do this if you want to do it. And I really like the idea of keeping control over things, being able to make the decisions yourself, work on your own time frame, all these kind of things. It's not that I necessarily don't trust people, but I like to be able to make the decisions when they need to be made, and it's just always been that way. And yeah, I don't really see any other way to operate. Maybe I'm just too much of a control freak to be able to let things go too far. I mean, I'm not against working with other labels, but I would certainly need to have like quite a lot of control over what's going on. I'm not sure where that comes from, but I've just always felt that way, and I've always felt like I could do a good job as well. So yeah, it's always been like that over the years, and it's worked. It's worked quite well, I think. I mean, it's not to say the bands and the music that I've worked on couldn't have done something more working with another label, but um, I like to do it this way. And also, it means over the years you learn so much. I've never had a manager or anything like that. I've learned how to do everything. I book all my own tours and so on. So there's no one taking any money or any cuts along the way. And also, you really learn how the business works. So it stops you from being screwed most of the time. You've got your eyes open. I never really understand these bands who don't care about any of that, and they just leave it to management or someone, and all they want to do is play music. I just think it's a real, it's a fine way to get screwed pretty quickly if you've got your eyes shut with those things.
Now, in addition to your own music, you also release a number of artists. How do you choose the bands that you work with or that you release on your label?
Most of the time, the artists we work with come from just meeting people on the road, becoming friends with people, or they're friends of friends. very, very rarely do we release something that comes from like a demo or something. I'm interested in. It's really important for me that the people involved in making the music are decent people, and I can work closely with them without any problems. I don't use contracts or anything like that. Everything's, it's a gentleman's agreement, if you like. So it's really important that the people are not assholes, And the only way to really guarantee that is if people can vouch for them, or you've met them and you get a good vibe from them, or you become friends or something. And over the years, the more and more I've toured and meet people, the more opportunities you find of people doing great work, and that's it really. There's always too much music for me to release, and I simply can't. I can't schedule enough, to do any more releases. There's like maybe 8 releases a year is probably about the maximum, possibly 9. Just around working on music and touring and trying to make money and so on. And there's just no way I can release any more music than that. So there's always records I would love to work on that I have to turn down. So yeah, I think that's a nice way to work. I think I wouldn't really like to do it any other way. And so far it's worked out quite well. I mean, we don't have any problems with any of the artists. So yeah, something to be said for that, I guess.
I'm curious, how many of the artists that you release are also collaborators on your own projects?
That's a good question. I would have to count that up.
But there's a fair bit of overlap, right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the ideas with the label is to bring people together and hopefully forge new collaborations between people as they become friends or interested in each other's music, and that's always been something I've been very interested in with the label. So I think the collaborations just come from the same thing I just described as meeting people. You get a good relationship with someone, and you think, oh, it'd be nice to work with you on some music, and it's it's the same process really as putting a record out, or and I like it that way. I think it's an interesting way to work. It always keeps you open to working with new people all the time, and yeah, I like that side of it. It's really interesting.
So I should mention that one of the artists that you collaborate with or that you release frequently is Aidan Baker,
Yeah.
who also runs the label Broken Spine.
Hmm.
How did you get in touch with him?
We played. It was maybe the first or one of the first Amissa shows we ever played was in Manchester, and we were opening for Aidan, and we just hit it off on the night. We hung out and talked about music and lots of other things, and we just kept in touch from there. And that's it. It's as simple as that. We forged a really good friendship over the years. He's obviously a very prolific guy, and he's now a really good friend. And we talk on email like every other day or something probably. And I've released quite a few of his records now. We have some. In fact, I have 2 shows with Naja next week, and he's coming to stay at our house as well next week with Naja. So, and then when we go on tour in October, we're doing another couple of shows in Naja, and we'll stay with those guys in Berlin. So it's nice to have a good friendship with Aidan. He's a great guy and a really good musician, really easy to work with. He's got really good work ethic. Yeah, he's everything you could really want in an artist. He's taking things seriously and working hard, and he makes great music as well.
Excellent. I interviewed Aidan a few weeks back for this same podcast, so
Cool.
when you see him, tell him I said hello.
I will. That's cool. Nice.
Let's talk about the challenges of running a record label in the current musical climate, because we're in an era where almost the entirety of human knowledge is available through the internet, and people have become disinclined to pay for it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
So how do you run a record label when people want everything for free and kind of forget that there's a cost, manufacturing or otherwise, to actually producing music?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in some ways it comes back to what we were saying before about the DIY aspect of it. I think it's really important to be able to be super flexible and be able to control as much of what you're doing as possible. So I think with the label over the years, we are of a size where you can shift quite easily. You don't really have this business model, this reliance upon certain things that perhaps some of the bigger labels and bigger artists have. So it's easier to navigate, as the changes arrive. And I think at the end of the day, it's just about being smart with what's going on. The way that digital music or digital media has changed over the years obviously means you don't sell as many copies of vinyl and CDs as you used to do. But there's absolutely nothing that anyone can do about that. That's just the way it is. It's not going to change. It's just going to get worse. And so you have to find a way of you either stop and do something else, or you just adapt and try and look at the small things which are working, and change accordingly. We certainly press way less than we used to do, but we've made the quality of the releases slightly better. So we've started doing coloured vinyl. We have thicker sleeves. We're doing lots of limited edition stuff with prints and these kind of things. And those are the ways that work now. Smaller runs, more interesting packaging. I also do screen printing as well, so it means we print all our own T-shirts. I print record sleeves to go on tour, so we have like tour exclusive sleeves. So these kind of things can make a difference, you know. We just have to be careful about how many records we press. Try and work out if the band's going to tour. It's still the hardest thing to navigate, is to figure out how many records to press, because you don't need to have an excess of stock lying around, you know. And those are the challenges, you know. And I think if you're a small label, you can navigate those things much easier. You know, if you're a big label, you're not going to be hand screen printing like 50 copies of a vinyl so a band can take it on tour. They just don't do those kind of things. So having the ability to do that is crucial to how we go about it. We try and keep the costs as low as possible, but it's, you know, it's difficult. I'm not going to lie to you. But you just have to have your eyes open and be smart. Talk with the artist, see who's touring, see who, you know, can you give the artist a few more copies that they can take on the road, and these kind of things. But you know, we work with artists who understand all these challenges, and they're working on, you know, they're fighting the same battles as we are. So it's just finding a way together. You know, it would be really nice to be able to give bands an advance to go and record, but the reality is we don't do that. The artist keeps all the rights to the records. They pay for the recording, they pay for the mastering, we pay for production. I do all the press. I also do tour booking for my own stuff, so we can help a little bit with tour booking. We have quite a good distribution network, you know, but it's a challenge. You know, it's a challenge. At the end of the day, you know, the artists keep the rights to the songs. So if we sell out of a record and we don't have the funds to repress it or whatever, the artist is free to go and find their own way, or find a new label, or do it themselves. You know, and I think these ways of working are really important to be able to survive these days.
Now, the big change in the current musical climate versus when you started Gizeh is streaming services, particularly Spotify, YouTube, Bandcamp, which is where most people are listening to the music, I assume. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate people listening to music for free and not necessarily wanting to own it the way they did in the past?
You just have to accept it. It's the way of the world now. It's the same, you know, for other industries have the same problems. I spent, certainly when Spotify first launched, I was really against it, and I spent many years not having any of the back catalogue on Spotify, because I thought to myself, well, you know, if this is the way that things are going, well, you know, everyone's in big trouble. But then over the years, you realise, okay, well, this thing's here to stay, you know. And if you look at all the artists who've gone against Spotify, Radiohead, Tool, they're all on there now. You know, they all realise at a certain point, well, you know, we could make some money from this. So it's inevitable that you have to do it. And I had a few of my artists were coming to me saying, you know, like, why are we not on here? And I thought, oh, fucking hell, okay, right, we're gonna have to do this. And yeah, I mean, it's changed. It's changed for sure. I use Spotify. You know, I work in the office most of the day, and it's a good means for listening to a bunch of different music and finding things easily and so on. And you know, I always say if people could, you know, get their fruit and veg for free, then they would. You know, so it's not a surprise that people are happy to just have these things for free. But as with anything that's free, it devalues somewhat in terms of the way that people perceive the thing. I think people have, not everybody, but I think a lot of people have, like, see less value because it's free. and whether that transpires to people going to shows and talking all the way through, or just wanting to take selfies or tweeting about it or something. It's all tied into the same thing. I think there is a slight lack of value there, but I don't think it's restricted to music per se. I think it could be anything, really. We don't make much money from streaming, but it needs to be there. It needs to happen. It's a way for people to find out about the bands, and you just have to accept it. The music's still the music. If people are really into a band and they want to stream it 1,000 times on Spotify, and that's cool. I have no problem with that whatsoever. As long as they're putting the music in their ears and in their lives, and maybe going to see the band live, that's important. And there's just nothing you can do about it. You just have to go along with it and find out ways to get people to keep buying records and keep coming to shows. Whether that will continue long term, who knows? But we still sell records and people still go to the shows, so that's cool for now.
And one last bit about streaming services. I noticed that you put a number of the Son of Amissa albums up on Bandcamp as name your price downloads. How do you feel about that? I guess Bandcamp in general, and then the kind of name your price, pay what you want philosophy.
Yeah, it's a real interesting one. I think we did the name your price thing as a trial, really. It's harder through my own Bandcamp page. I don't really use that much. Most of the traffic for all the releases, even my own releases, is directed through the Gizeh Bandcamp. So that's a better platform for getting the stats and things. But it's a really interesting one because my opinion on certainly on downloads now is downloads they're dead as far as I'm concerned. No one really needs to download music anymore. So if people can get it on Spotify for free, then why not let them have it for free on Bandcamp? And then people can decide what they feel their worth is. If they want to give £1, they can give £1. But getting £1 via Bandcamp is still way better than it would be if they went and streamed it from Spotify, for example. And they're engaged with the label. They can see the entire catalog there. Then maybe they'll discover something else. If you take something for free, your name goes on the mailing list. So it's just more of a way of trying to get people, if people want to get it, get a little bit more money that way. But I've certainly seen over the last, maybe the last year, that the download revenue has really dropped off, quite significantly, as people switch from download to streaming. Because people have got more room on their devices to stream things. Even if you want to you can download from Spotify, so you can listen, if you're offline or whatever. So there's a million different ways that to go about doing things. I think Bandcamp's a really useful tool to experiment with. Generally speaking, what we do now is we set the price of the new releases to £5 for the digital download. And then over the course of time, we allow them to then go for the name your price. And I think the two things they probably even themselves out somewhere along the line. There's definitely no magic kind of solution to that stuff. It's just more like trying to figure out what people's habits are and what they prefer to do. And the idea of being able to almost donate money, I think, is quite interesting. If you go to Bandcamp and you stream the record and you're like, yeah, I quite fancy downloading that, I'll take that. You might go, I'll just give them £1. They might not want to pay £5 or whatever. If they just want to give £1, then that's fine. That's either what they can afford, or it's what they think it's worth. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I'm always aware of what's going on. I've always got my eyes open, checking stats and seeing what's going on. But definitely the downloading side of things is starting to die off quite rapidly, I think.
So let's move away from the icky music business and speak about the music itself. Speak about the
Yeah,
music itself.
yeah.
Aidan Amissa has a new album coming out in a couple of weeks. Let's talk a little bit about the origin of the project. When did it form, and what did you set out to accomplish?
Well, initially the idea was to start a project with my friend Angela, who's a brilliant musician, Angela Chan, a brilliant string player, and my friend Owen as well, Owen Pegg, who's in 100-Year-Old Man. We really want to start doing some more kind of dark kind of instrumental music. This is back in Leeds quite a few years ago. And then over the years, those guys have kind of become too busy really to get more involved. So I took the project um, on my own, basically, and then just worked with different collaborators over the albums, which is really enjoyable. It's a nice way of working. I'm very free to be able to do basically whatever I want with that project. You know, some of the albums have had quite a lot of collaborators on there, and then the new album is I've done almost everything on the new album. I've just got Claire, my wife, and David Arms playing lap steel, and those guys have been on the last couple of tours, so it felt right to get those guys on the new record. But yeah, the idea behind the project was just to explore some sort of dronier, darker territories, I guess. I think we've succeeded in that. I think all the albums are quite different from one another, but there is some kind of thread between them. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting the new album out and touring as well. I'm working on a new live set at the moment. So yeah, I'm looking forward to playing new stuff live as well.
Now, we talked about your process for writing music. What is your process for collaborating? Do you guys have a studio where you, for lack of a better term, jam together? Or are you coming in with your own musical ideas and they play on top of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's no jamming involved. We have a studio here, like a home studio, um, which we can use for rehearsals and doing all the recordings as well. But mostly for the collaborations, it's down to um, I will put the piece of music together and then take a step back and think about what it needs. Who do I know who can add something interesting, and then take it from there. So the collaborations are usually either I give the piece of music to someone and just say like it's a free for all. You know, I trust you to do something interesting, or it will be something I've sort of recorded myself either on guitar or something like that, and say to someone, you know, take this idea and either replicate it with your own instrument, like strings, for example, or you know, take the idea of the melody here that's on the guitar and run with it, take it in a different direction if you like, and then often I'll pull out my own version of that. Like the Gatherer, for example, I I stripped back nearly all the guitar from the album after I got all the music back from the collaborators. Once I put that in, the guitar just felt like, okay, we don't need this anymore. So there's barely any guitar on that record, which is quite interesting. So yeah, there's no real definite way of working. It just depends. Usually, I'll just hear something in the song and think, oh, okay, this needs this, or I can imagine this person doing something really interesting over this. Or occasionally, I'll have somebody in mind, like before, just only because I feel like, oh, this person could add something really cool, and I'll either write a piece which they can then replicate, or they'll just be in my mind from the beginning of like the album process to say, well, you know, it'd be really cool to get this person involved in this. And that's it really. There's certainly no jamming involved. I mean, when I write the songs, they're not played live until they're finished. So the albums are written, the songs are written, everything's finished, and then it's a matter of like how do we play this live? Which is a fairly unusual way, I think, of doing things. But it's the only way to sort of operate, with this project.
And how do you translate these songs to the live experience?
There's a few different ways we do it. It depends on who is coming on particular tours and what people can play. Sometimes we do different versions of songs. Sometimes we dig in and pull out like the electronics and put them on samples to use live. Yeah, there's different ways to go about it. Like for the new stuff, I've worked out a solo set for the new stuff. So basically, I can go and play any show anywhere. Now I have a setup that I can fly with. That's stripped back. So I've got a new way that I've had to look at the songs and think like, okay, how do I do this on my own? I'm using a 4-track live as well, which is pretty cool. Allows me to do lots of manipulating drones and so on. And then so I've built up this structure of a new live set based on these restrictions of being able to fly and carry gear easily. And then whoever's coming in to play on tours or one-off shows or whatever can easily fit into that template. And there's an element of improvising around that, but it seems to work quite well. So like for the upcoming shows next week, I'm playing solo with Naja, and then I've got a couple of shows with opening for Ephraim from Godspeed, which David's going to come and play lap steel with, and then the October tour will be me and Claire as a duo. So she's playing bass and clarinet. So this basic structure that I formed for the solo set can just be built on top of by whoever's coming and playing. So we can usually get away with maybe one or two rehearsals. And I've recorded the live set, so I can send it to people and say, okay, like this is what it's going to be. Have a think about what you want to do. And it's good. It works that way. It's flexible. It allows us to do more stuff because people have jobs and so on. So it's not always easy for people to get time off and so on. So it allows me to do more things, which is crucial really these days.
Would you describe Amissa as a solo project with collaborators, or are the collaborators what makes it different from your other projects?
Yeah, I think it's a solo project with collaborators. I think I'm taking care of everything from artwork, writing everything, releasing it, everything. So it would be weird to not call it a solo project, and I like the idea of maybe being able to come and go with the collaborators a little bit, like be able to do things without any and just release something that's just me, or basically being able to invite anyone to be involved. One of the ideas behind the band is to try and keep evolving and not making the same records. So part of the idea with the collaboration aspect of it is to allow things to be different every time, and bringing other people to enable that really.
Now, what can we expect from this newest album?
The new album is 2 tracks, 2 20-minute tracks. It's a real mixture of some kind of heavy ambient drone elements in there. There's also some real like filthy electronic parts. So the 2 songs really move quite drastically from beginning to end. So yeah, I'm pleased with it. It's out in September, so it's creeping ever closer. September feels like it should be a long time away, but it's really not a long time away at all. And yeah, I think it's come together well. I think it's different to all the other records. There's hints at what happened on the last record. There's a few things pulled from ideas from earlier records, but it definitely stands on its own 2 feet. This one, I think.
Very cool. So as you mentioned, the album will be coming out September 13th, and there will be both physical and digital releases for this.
Yeah, it's coming out vinyl and CD, and digital as well. Vinyl, we have some limited like label editions that we've done. So it's the release is in collaboration with Console in Sounds in Belgium. So the 2 labels are involved in the release. So they'll have copies over there in Belgium as well. And yeah, so we've got the vinyls are white vinyl, and we've got some label editions which have got some screen printed artwork involved, and we'll also have, as I was saying earlier, we've got some tour editions which are exclusive ones that you can only buy on the road. The CD sleeves are all screen printed as well. But yeah, pre-orders are going okay, so we'll see.
knowing what you know now in terms of releasing music and the music business, is there anything you change about what you did in the beginning of Gizeh Records?
That's a good question. I'm not sure really. I mean, I really believe in like in slow progress. Basically, I really believe in that. Things take time to get to a certain point. I mean, I think there's obviously things professionally you maybe think, well, I could have done that a little bit better, or studied that a little bit more, but each step of the way there was no real like professional plan or anything. There's no real, this is where we want to be in 10 years or any, they still don't have that now. I only look really 1 year ahead, like all the time. I'm not really looking any further than one year ahead. I know pretty much what's going to happen for the whole of next year, and then that's it. So there is no long-term plan for anything. And I think just in the early days, we it's the same with anyone starting a business, or you make mistakes, but you just learn along the way, and it's hard to say if you would change anything. I mean, I think you could always look back at things and go, I could have done that differently, or maybe a bit better. But no, I'm satisfied with the progress the label made. Everything was done in a really natural and organic kind of fashion. Most of the artists that I was working with were at the same point in their lives and careers and so on. So we all kind of learnt together. And I think if some of the bands that we put out early on would have maybe come out now, there might have been a slightly different outcome. But also, as we've talked about a lot, you're changing along with the music industry, or whatever industry you might be involved in, and so that dictates what your decisions are and what moves you make. The industry is just changing all the time, so it's hard to say if you would have done anything different, because you just react to things as you go along, and that's still the case now. It's the same for any business. It doesn't matter what you're doing, I think.
Cool. And before I let you go, what's next for you? What do you have planned?
In the short term, we have the new Amissa record coming out on September 13th, and around that we have touring. So at the moment we're deep into rehearsals for the tour, trying to work out how to play the new material. So we have a couple of shows. I'm doing a couple of solo shows with Naja next week, and then a couple of shows with opening for Ephraim from Godspeed in London and Manchester. And then we go to Europe for 2 weeks in October, and then there's just sort of sporadic shows and things happening rest of the year and into next year. And I think there's another tour in February probably going to happen. Hopefully go to Italy for that tour. And looking into next year and seeing how much we can do, if we can do festivals or find some good supports or some other small tours and things. Just promoting the new record as much as possible, and then I think usually the routine that I've kind of got myself into now is basically trying to release an album pretty much every year. So over the winter, once the touring's, between the October and February tours is basically start working on a new record. That's the way the year is kind of mapped out, because of the label and other things that I do. I really need to look at like the whole year and put things into months or weeks or pockets of time and go, okay, we're touring here and we're touring here. These couple of months we take for writing a new record, and that seems to have worked for the last couple of years. So continue down that path of down that schedule. Because I do so many different things, I really need to be super organized with everything. So I'm not really the kind of person that goes, waits around for inspiration to write a song or whatever. I'll just go, right, next week I'm doing like Thursday and Friday, I'm just doing music all day, and then I'll just go into the studio and work on music all day, see what comes out. I'm very much a believer of just showing up and doing the work. I'm not one for waiting for inspiration to strike. So yeah, that's the plan. There's always a million things going on, and the days are always 12 hours long and still not long enough. That's good. It's the way I like it. Yeah, so just continue with that plan and see where we end up.
Thank you so much, Richard.
You're welcome. No problem.